Hello folks, welcome to my review of the Honda ZR-V. This is a new model to Honda that sits in between the HR-V and the CR-V in the SUV lineup. Styling wise, it seems to be a little bit of a mashup of various siblings from within the Honda range. You can certainly see HR-V in it, you can certainly see the Civic in it to a degree. I'm not convinced that the styling works 100%, but it's not going to offend anyone. This car combines a 2-litre petrol engine with hybrid technology. It's the iMMD system from Honda. More about that in the test drive section, but essentially there's no traditional transmission in this car. Prices range between $39,500 and $42,900 plus optional extras. So it's not a cheap car, and it's competing in what is a fairly packed mid-size SUV market. We've got 181 horsepower and 0 to 60 time of 7.5 seconds, but bad news for caravanners. 750 kilos is the towing capacity, although if you've got something braked, that goes up to 1,500 kilos. The boot's quite a simple affair, quite a nice shape to get things in and out of. What's not so good is it's fairly shallow and you've only got 380 litres of space, which for a point of reference is about the same as you get in a Ford Focus or a VW Golf. It is a bit bigger, about 50 litres bigger than an HR-V, but certainly something like a Sportage or a Skoda Karoq is going to be much more generous when it comes to that rear boot room. The front cabin in the ZR-V is one of the high points for me. It shares a lot of its layout and design cues with the Honda Civic, which for me is one of my favourite cars in the last couple of years. It's just well considered. Everything's kind of where it should be. It's a nice mix between touchscreen and physical knobs and dials, and it doesn't really put a foot wrong. Where it could be perhaps slightly better is with some of the materials. Just things like the little volume switch on the stereo doesn't feel particularly robust. Instead of plastic, that would have been nice with a little knurled metal finish or something. Things like the indicator stalks feel a tiny bit cheap in this car. Certainly not the quality you expect from such a quality brand. But those minor grumbles aside, it's a really nice place to be. The infotainment system, if you haven't used one of the new Honda infotainment systems, is brilliant. It's so much better than the outgoing system, which was a turd. This is really a massive step forward. You've got wireless Apple CarPlay, you've got Android Auto, you've got built-in sat-nav. It's really simple to use, really nicely laid out, and everything's easy to control, as I said, with that mixture of physical buttons, dials, and touchscreen. Air conditioning controls are very familiar, sensible, all laid out, nothing particularly exciting going on there. In this one we've got a wireless charging pad, 12-volt power socket down there, a couple of cup holders, and then the gear selector system. I'm not a massive fan of this. It's buttons, it's in lots of Hondas nowadays. I feel like a physical sort of lever would have been a little bit nicer. It does nothing wrong, and certainly parks where you expect it to be, reverses where you expect it to be, drives where you expect it to be, etc. But it perhaps lets the side down a tad. But then got selectors for drive mode, hill descent, electronic parking brake, etc. More on those in the test drive section of the video in a mo. We've then got a really capacious little center console armrest here, which is nice. Now, one of the weirdest things is the location of the USB sockets. So we've got one here next to my thigh and another one next to the passenger thigh. We've got USB-A on my side, USB-C on this side. There is a little shelf underneath, so you could plug in, a second phone there if you've got one in your wireless charging pad. So I guess there's method in the madness. It just seems like such an odd place to have it, right next to your thigh, where if you've got a long USB stick plugged into that, for example, you could easily damage it, I would guess, particularly if you're of the chunky variety. The steering wheel they're using in these new Hondas is great. Nice selection of physical thumb controls and simple buttons, not a haptic in sight. And what a wonderful thing it is as a result of it. The driver information display is very bright, bold, colourful, gives you just enough information, just where you want it. Material quality is generally very good, although there are some hard plastics in here as well as the soft touch stuff, but those hard plastics don't feel cheap. As front cabins go in mid-size SUVs, they don't get much better than this one, folks. Once you get out onto the open road, no real surprises with the ZR-V, especially if you're used to driving any of the recent crop of Honda vehicles. It actually is far better than it should be on the twisty stuff. It's an SUV, so you're not going to drive it like a lunatic around the bends, but the suspension's really well weighted, really well sorted, and you stay surprisingly planted if you do go into a corner a bit more spirited than usual. But as I said, it's not that kind of car, is it? You know, it's a mid-size family SUV, and it does everything you want a mid-size family SUV very well. It's pretty frugal. Real world MPG is actually better in my experience than the claimed 48 point something. I've been getting round about 50 real world MPG. That is around town. MPG does go down a little bit at motorway speeds, and that's because the engine's working a bit harder to power those electric motors that are powering the wheels. That's right, folks. Although this is a petrol car, you don't plug this in at the moment, although a plug-in hybrid is coming. It works much like an EV, just with a petrol generator. So there's no gearbox as such. There's a petrol engine that goes into a generator that then basically puts power into the battery and powers those electric motors that are turning the wheels. So it's a bit of a complicated setup, but in its simplest form, think of it like that. The car's got a very respectable 0 to 60 time of 7.5 seconds, but at no point does it feel that quick. Just the way the power goes down, well, no, perhaps the driving position and a combination of things, it doesn't make the car feel particularly rapid, but 7.5 seconds for an SUV of this size is not too shabby really. Where I feel the ZR-V perhaps lets itself down just a touch is in the refinement stakes. Whilst it's not a rattly old diesel, it doesn't give you the level of refinement you might expect from a hybrid SUV of its class. There's a little bit too much wind and tyre noise coming into the cabin. The cabin doesn't feel particularly well insulated. It's not the end of the world by any means, but when we look just how competitive this segment of the market is, it feels a bit, especially considering it's starting at 39.5 grand. The suspension's a tad firmer than you might expect, but as I said earlier, you know, it is quite good through the bends, and that is the compromise that you have to make generally. If you want, you know, good cornering, you get a little bit of a firmer ride. I don't think in any way that takes away from how comfortable the car is generally, but if you live somewhere where it's littered with potholes and speed humps, you might feel those a little bit more in this than perhaps in something like a Kia Sportage. The steering's reasonably direct, no issues with that whatsoever, and altogether as a complete package, it's a nice easy thing to live with, a nice easy thing to drive. There are also several different driving modes to choose from. You've got sport, normal, economy and snow, and this one's also got sort of a hill descent assist, which makes it easy to control the rate of descent if you're going down a particularly steep drop. All in all, I think you have to say that the driving experience is generally a very good one. It's not perfect, there are a few little flaws. I'd certainly like a little bit more refinement when it comes to being sheltered from that outside noise. But yeah, it's a nice, easy car to live with that's reasonably frugal and will suit most families pretty well. In the back here, you've got plenty of leg room, plenty of headroom, even though we have got this big panoramic sunroof in here. By the way, that panoramic sunroof is a great box to tick because it really lets a lot of light in for your rearmost passengers. You could sit 3 abreast in here, but 3 adults are going to be very tight because that middle seat is really only half a seat. You've got a nice big comfy central armrest with 2 exposed cup holders, and we've got 2 USB-Cs down here and some air vents. It's a nice place to sit, folks. So there's a lot to like about this car. It's got a very well sorted interior. It's nice enough to drive. It returns decent MPG, ticks a lot of boxes. It's very easy to live with. However, it's in a very packed segment of the market. The pricing seems a little bit steep, and there are 1 or 2 little refinement issues that perhaps don't help it sort of really stand out in that very competitive class. It's a very good car that I strongly recommend you go and test drive. If you'd like to see the latest lease deals available on one of these, click the link to Lease Loco that's in the video description. That will take you just to Honda ZR-V lease deals that are available at the time you click, and that updates in real time. If you've enjoyed this review, please give the video a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell if you haven't already done so. And please leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts on the ZR-V. Is this enough for you to stand out from the pack, or would you prefer something like a Kia Sportage or a Skoda Karoq? Tell us in the comments.